let's talk about some of this. We've been talking a little bit about John chapter 7 already. And we'll talk more about it later, so we won't spend too much time with this. Let's say you're doing a paper on John chapter 7, 53 through 8:11. And you're thinking about your commentary, one of the things you really want to do is find a commentary that takes the time to address this text critical issue. Does it belong in the Gospel of John or not? Right? Some manuscripts, of course, don't have this. Some manuscripts have it in different places. Some manuscripts don't even have it in the Gospel of John. They have it in the Gospel of Luke. And so, a good commentary is going to go through that information, tell you the different things about this. Right? That some manuscripts don't have it. Some manuscripts they have it in different places. Some it's in a different gospel. It's going to also then give you evidence for its inclusion, evidence against its conclusion, and then you should get a clear sense from the author whether or not they think that this particular text belongs in the Gospel of John or not. Now, just because this author has said that doesn't mean you necessarily have to agree with it, but you're going to a commentary that gets some help in thinking through some of these issues. And so you, yes, can weigh your evidence and say, okay, well, maybe that's a good point, or that doesn't really seem to matter that much. And so will the commentary you're getting address those issues, or does it ignore those issues? A homiletical commentary, for example, might not give you those issues. Pastoral commentary might not give you those issues, depending on, again, who the author is. Is this someone who's a New Testament scholar, or is this someone who is, a preacher? Not that it's wrong for a preacher to write a commentary, but a preacher is going to be interested in certain things, and they may or may not bring up something that would be important for a research paper. And so thinking through some of those things are very helpful. Another passage that is rather, the use in the commentary is rather important would be something like 1 Peter 3. Somebody get 1 Peter chapter 3 and read verses 18 through 21 for us, please.
For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. There is also an antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of the good conscience toward God through the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
All right, so there's several things in this passage that are a challenge. And so one thing could be the issue of baptism, and depending on where the particular person stands on baptism, and how they address that section. But another issue is this idea of the spirits in prison, Jesus preaching to the spirits in prison. A good commentary is going to talk about the options of what that passage means. And there are a few different options. One is that when Jesus died, he descended into hell and preached to the people that lived prior to Noah, giving them the option to repent. All right? This is sometimes referred to as the harrowing of hell, and so you might see that come up. Now, a commentary, a person who writes a commentary from that position might just have a discussion of, well, this is what that means. But that's not the only option. Other people have suggested what that means was that Christ, in his pre-existence, right, prior to being Jesus of Nazareth, was the Spirit that inspired Noah as a preacher of righteousness to speak to the people of his time. right? And so it's not that Christ went back in time or Christ went into hell, but that during the time of Noah, Noah preached inspired by the Spirit of Christ. Those people that he spoke to are now in prison in the sense of hell, right? And I don't think there's anybody that disagree that in prison there refers to hell or to torment or something like that, right? And so the agreement is that it's referring to people who are now experiencing punishment. But when did Jesus, through Noah, preach to them? Another option is quite similar in that Jesus, while his body was in the grave and he was in the spirit realm, yes, preached to those people, but it was more of a preaching victory, proclaiming victory, not offering them repentance, but telling them that I've conquered and I was right, and I've given you the opportunity to be a part of this, and you missed it. So a good commentary, those are the three basic options of that passage. But a good commentary is going to give you those options and talk about the pros and cons of each, even though they might come up with, I believe it's referring to this particular position. Probably what's going to be most useful for you, if you were doing a paper on 1 Peter 3, and I think this is one of the passages that is an option, is the giving of the options. How the author comes down on that may or may not be useful to you. And that's the same when you look at other difficult passages. And if you look through that list that I have on Blackboard, that's, most of the passages that I've picked are the so-called difficult passages, like baptism for the dead, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 29. What is baptism for the dead? Well, to be honest, we don't know. And hopefully any commentary you look at is going to say, to be honest, we don't know. But they're going to talk about some different options and also give you information of how there's very little information, even in extra-biblical texts, about this passage. And so, other difficult passages like that, the long ending, short ending of Mark chapter 16, that's another challenge. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the man of sin or the man of lawlessness, or the lawless one, depending on your translation. Throughout history, there have been various positions on what this represents. And a good commentary is going to give you some options on that. I'm going to tell you, right, here are the options, here's the evidence that's being used in support of it, but also consider this, also consider this, also consider this. Perhaps this is most obvious and most challenging when it comes to the book of Revelation. So I brought a variety of commentaries with me. We'll spend a little bit more time here talking about Revelation because it is one of those where a lot of people struggle with Revelation and understanding it. And then, of course, there are a wide variety of opinions on Revelation. So I have here with me, and of course, those of you that are either online or watching it on YouTube aren't going to be able to see it, but I have here 6 different commentaries in front of me. They are different types of commentaries, and they are different approaches, and they all have different positions. When it comes down to it, there are essentially 4 basic positions on Revelation, just in general. One is that the events that are described in Revelation took place either entirely or mostly in our past, and sometimes referred to as the preterist position. Now, there are some varieties among preterists. Some preterists would be it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Some would be it's the fall of Rome. Some would be the entirety of Revelation is only about things that are in our past. It's all been fulfilled. Others would be most of it has been fulfilled, but those last chapters, about halfway through chapter 20 through the end, are about things that are still to come. They're about heaven and what awaits us in the future. Right? And so there's still some prophecy in Revelation that has yet to be fulfilled to some preterists. The second option is kind of the complete opposite. that Revelation is talking about events solely in the future. There are things that have not been fulfilled but will be fulfilled in the end times. And that essentially Revelation provides a roadmap of the events in the last days. Right? So there's the first option, which is mostly in the past or entirely in the past. Other option, entirely in the future. There might be some futurists who will say there are a few things that have been fulfilled already, but in general the futurist position is these things are going to happen at the end of time. In between the preterist and the future position are two other positions. One that we call the historical position. This position says that the book of Revelation talks about historical events from the time of Jesus until the end times. And so that things like the rise of the Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation, the rise of Islam, other major historical world-changing events are included in the book of Revelation. And so the idea is that it has been fulfilled or is in the process of being fulfilled throughout time. Right? Preterists, solely in the past, dealt with either the destruction of Jerusalem or the fall of Rome. Historical, right, going through these different major events up till the end of time. Futurist in the end of time. The fourth position is the idealist position. The idealist position is that this is more about different cycles that take place in human history. Provides philosophical positions or philosophical principles about dealing with persecution, about the pressure to compromise. And that is going to face Christians in these cycles throughout time. And so it's less about distinct historical events and more about cycles that will take place through history. Those are the four basic positions on this. And a good commentary on Revelation is going to talk about that. Right? Now, a lot of that depends on the type of commentary. All right, so this book here, called The Thrill of Hope, by a man named Bruce Green, is meant to be more of a devotional type of book than really a distinct commentary. Right? And so, in his section, there's not much said about the book of Revelation as far as the overall giving those options, right? So he has a frequently asked questions section, right, in the first part of it, and it's like one of the questions is this book about the future? Are there parts that haven't been fulfilled? And it's only a couple paragraphs. In it, of course, he talks about, some people think about it as a book of fulfillment, but he says, although it's tempting, we should avoid thinking of Revelation exclusively or even primarily as a book of predictions. Approaching it in such a manner is like thinking about a wonderful meal only in terms of the dishes it is served on. As to the time of those predictions, John tells his first century audience at the beginning and end of Revelation that the things he is writing about will happen soon. Right? And so he essentially talks about, some people think it's about the future, but it's really about things in the past. Except for a couple of things, toward the end. But that's it. Now, if you're going to study Revelation, that might be nice if you have that position already, right? Because this kind of confirms your view. But if you don't have this view, if you come to this book thinking, okay, I think Revelation's about the future, this isn't going to help you one way or the other. It doesn't do anything to try and convince you. And so it doesn't even address your position and whether that's right or wrong. More helpful would be commentaries like this one, from the New International Greek Testament Commentary, right, by G.K. Field. When you get into that, after I get through all these pages of bibliography, right, it gives you all sorts of sources in here that are about Revelation. Right? You finally get, it's Roman numerals, so 64 pages. of prefatory material. About 40 of them are bibliography. All right, he talks about the date. He talks about other things related to that, both talking about the early date, the late date. Talks about the genre. Gets into the symbolism. All right, I'm on page 60 by this point. And so he spends 15 to 20 pages talking about the different options of Revelation, the different ways of approaching it. Right? And so, there's what's in here is good information on the different options that you have. So that would probably be more useful, even though Beale tends to be more of an idealist, and so you may or may not be an idealist. But he's going to give you the information on all of the positions. What would particularly be helpful is this one. This is it's Revelation 4 Views, revised and updated. It's a parallel commentary. What's interesting about this one, right, is that throughout the book, he's got these parallel columns about the different passages. This is what what's in the first one? This is what a historicist would say about this particular passage. This is what a preterist would say about this particular passage. This is what a futurist would say. All right? And so this is helpful in that it gives you all the options, but when it comes to this question of the date, those kind of things, let me find it here. He goes through, let's see. There is about 30 pages or so dealing with the different types of options, the approaches. Right? So he's going to give you some good information. The same kind of thing with Grant Osborne's commentary. All of these better commentaries are going to give you information about those different options. Yes, they might come down on one. Right? Osborne, for example, is a futurist. And so a lot of what he says is from a futurist position. But he's going to give you all the information at the beginning about here's what the idealist thinks, here's what the historicist thinks, etc. Greg, the Four Views, doesn't really come down on a position. He tries to be generous to everybody, which can be kind of frustrating. Right? You say, well, okay, come down to a conclusion. But the idea is, a good commentary is going to give you all of that information. And that's especially true with perhaps one of the most difficult passages in the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 through 18. Somebody read Revelation 13, 16 through 18 for us. Not everybody wants.
Wait,
Revelation 13, 16 through 18.
okay, I got you. Okay, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bound, to receive a mark in their right hand on their forehead, and that no man might die or fail, save her keep that hath the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the numbers of the beast, for it is the number of the man, and the number is 640.